Have you ever heard of the boy who cried wolf? Of course you have. We learn the story early on in our childhoods, don't we? We learn that telling lies for attention is generally an unwise policy, since if we ever really do need urgent attention, and we do have an urgent emergency, and we have a history of lying, people may not believe us when we need them to believe us most. And as a result of our lying, we may end up getting eaten by a wolf as a result of our lying history. That's the story anyway, that's the way it goes. Well, this weekend in London, there was a rather large protest. A very large protest, as it happens. Now, I couldn't be at this one, however, I know several people who were at the protest and gave me reports of the day. One of which was activist and campaigner Naila, who I had the pleasure of sitting down and talking to earlier today about the event, and here is what she had to say. Joy. First of all, I'd like to ask is, how many people do you think were there, and why were they there?
It's hard to know the numbers because for a change, we didn't get any aerial footage of the march, which we did at the last one that you and I both were on. There were initial predictions of 200,000, that moved up to 500,000, and then to 250,000. I stopped at 2 points during the march for, about half an hour each time. And there was just people coming on and coming along and on and on. It was never ending.
Yeah,
so
I did see some of your thread that you posted on Twitter, and some of the thread from other, people that I trust that were down there, and hundreds of thousands seem to be on the low end. If there was 100,000 there when we were there last time, there seems to be. I mean, there's probably 500,000. What do you think?
Yeah, easily. I mean, I think one BBC reporter said there was a few thousand there. I think that's the most reporting that the BBC have done, aside from speaking about the police violence.
Mm-hmm. We were told by the Mirror and the people that did cover it that this was people who were protesting the lockdown. That's what they said. They were an anti-lockdown protest, was it?
It was a number of things. It was protesting lockdowns, or predicting lockdowns that might be coming again, which have been predicted. There were people protesting vaccine passports. I even saw placards against the police powers bills. It was quite varied, but I think mainly it was anti-lockdown.
Is it fair to call them an anti-lockdown mob, though? This is the thing, because
not.
if there was 500,000 people there, that went off pretty peacefully, didn't it?
It was entirely peaceful, except for at the very end. It was in the park. It was entirely peaceful. It was fun. It was like.
So how long did it last then? When did it start?
I believe people were starting to meet up in Hyde Park around 12 o'clock, and then it went on till about, 7.
Really, that long? And was it like a station? It wasn't a stationary protest. People are marching around London, like the last one we were at.
Exactly. I think it was the exact same route, all down Oxford Street, going to like the Old Bailey, Embankment, Parliament Square, St James Park, and then back to Hyde Park.
Yeah, I'll probably superimpose it over this interview. I saw somebody posted an aerial photo and just tried to fill in their own, what the media usually do on these things. They usually show an area photo and where the route goes. Well, they didn't. So somebody on Twitter had to do it amateurly and sort of, this is the route we took, and was trying to estimate, some people stopped and just, had a cup of coffee and whatever for 20 minutes and then got up and then rejoined the march because it was still going past them. There's a huge amount of people here. So It's not really fair to call them an anti-lockdown mob, I wouldn't have thought. Is it people who were protesting the authoritarian turn of this government and what it's doing then?
Of course. I mean, one of the popular songs along the march is "We Are the 99%." And that should tell you a lot about what is going on here. People are not happy with the government, with how they've dealt with, I guess, the pandemic throughout, and they don't trust them. There's no trust in the government, I think.
What's you say we are 99%. What sort of people were there? Were they all right wingers? Were they all, socialists? Were they all communists? Were they, Corbynists? What were they for to be labelled an anti-lockdown mob rather than anything else? Because were these people coming together? Was it, Naylor?
There were people on the left and the right. There were people from the centre. We have that still.
What sort of backgrounds?
All backgrounds, all ages. Children were there. It was really mixed. And what I really like about these protests is the people on the right and the left. It's pretty clear who, which side you are on. You could tell sometimes by this, the placards people have or whatever. And they come together. There's no animosity between us.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm reading Matt Taibbi's book at the moment, Hate Inc., and he talks about how the media, obviously there's only very virulent arguments, but we're on a very tiny spectrum at the moment of what you can and can't talk about. And what you can do in the media is hate the other side. So you can hate on Boris Johnson and the Conservatives, and you can hate on Labour and the Labour Party, and you can hate on the right and you can hate on the left. But when they all come together like this, it's very difficult to be able to report on it because you're not dividing people with your reporting. You're actually reporting on something that everybody's going to come together on. And I've been saying for the last 3 years, this is what they're trying desperately to stop. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, they've always wanted to divide us. That's very clear. And this has got to scare the system to some degree, that there are people coming together on some of these issues, on the fact that they distrust the government. I think that within the mainstream, there is this idea that everyone who went to the protest denies like everything about the pandemic, etc. It's absurd. It's cartoonish.
No, I totally agree. I'm glad you pointed on that. It's, unworthy enemies. You'll pick China, for instance, but no, you can't pick anybody. Saudi Arabia, for instance, they're our friend. You can't talk about. You'll talk about certain human rights or rights abuses, but not those of our friends. And it's very similar to the protests as well. You can talk about one sort of protest in a way, but you can't talk about another. You certainly can't talk about.
Exactly. This is what I do want to talk about, that because there wasn't this kind of animosity towards the vigil for Sarah Everard and the protests that came after that. There wasn't that kind of animosity towards people. I think there was a march for football or something last week, which I don't think was the same.
Yeah, there was a massive crowd of people outside Chelsea, massive outside Liverpool. We obviously saw the crowd outside Buckingham Palace a few weeks ago when Prince Philip died. You mentioned the Sarah Everard vigil as well there. There was no social distancing, very few people wearing masks. And, obviously Gary Lineker didn't say a goddamn thing about any of those, did he? Or maybe he did. I don't know. Maybe somebody will prove me wrong. But, the level of vitriol towards the people yesterday, over the weekend, was far higher. And certainly in the media, there wasn't the rhetoric. It was a very different rhetoric that they took on the weekend than it was to the other protests, wasn't it?
Yeah, this has been the case over and over again with these marches. It's the system obviously doesn't like them, so they get their media, the mainstream media, to demonize people. But, you know, for anyone who's curious, I would recommend just coming along. You could see what it's like. You could talk to people. People are very friendly and engaging, you know. Get down there. See, there's various reasons why people are attending.
Yeah, I mean, you attended as well, I think, a Julian Assange protest as well the same day. So, you know, there were other protests going on that day as well.
Exactly, yeah. I went over to the Assange vigil, which was great. And then back to Hyde Park. I was following some of the live streaming, so I saw people were back in the park. And it was, you know, kind of run its course by that point, the protest. People were just hanging out, people were listening to music. There was like African drums and the saxophone. The bit, I don't know if you want to go into when the police.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm going to talk about, because I mean, the last march we were at, what happened? It finished at Trafalgar Square, finished about 5 o'clock, and people, rather than hang around Trafalgar Square and congregate and block traffic, they went down to, was it King James's Park or something like that?
St. James Park, yeah.
St. James Park, and where they could spread out, and because obviously some people hadn't seen each other. You know, we're coming to the end of lockdown now, and the whole day the police ignored the entire protest. They ignored it. Apart from when they went past New Scotland Yard, they all surrounded New Scotland Yard for some reason, because I don't know, they thought maybe it was going to get stormed by this protest or whatever.
Oh, they did that again. I mean, it's just they've got the barriers and stuff.
Did they look as scared as they did last time? Because they looked petrified when I walked past last time.
I mean, there's a lot of people that have a lot of animosity against the police now, especially since what happened to Sarah Everard, and because of the Police Powers Bill. So, you know, there is animosity directed at the police. So to some, you know, you could argue whether that's justified or not, but yeah, they're protecting that building, the Scotland Yard building. I did say, you know.
So you got into the park, the Hyde Park, and there were less people there now. So there's not the hundreds of thousands that there were. There's maybe, I don't know, how many people were there, would you think?
There wasn't a lot. I mean, at the point when the police charged, I would say into the crowd that they charged, might have been about 70 people, maybe less. But the point is they wait till the numbers dwindle and then they go.
Was there any warning that they gave for this charging, and what was the point of it?
Well, I was told after. I didn't experience it myself, but the police had been going around telling people that they had to leave, I think at about 6:30 or something like that. And obviously people didn't pay attention to that that advice.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I was watching some of the music and then a couple of speakers, and one of the speakers got distracted because and he pointed out, and we all saw these lines of police. There were 2 lines of police, maybe, I don't know, 14. I'm not quite sure how many, but they were getting ready to charge in a similar way that they did at the last.
Because somebody was going to speak?
Oh no, because I guess they wanted people out of the park and they thought that there was enough people for them to manage, you know,
So they've ignored the hundreds of thousands all day, right? So now, obviously, they've come in the park. I'm assuming here they're saying COVID regulations is the reason you've got to get out the park, yes? So they're using this COVID regulation arbitrarily wherever they can. They weren't using it on the big protest because there's obviously 500,000 people there, or whatever, 100,000 people, let's say, 200,000 people. So they can't disperse them. Meanwhile, they'll charge into a group of what, 70 people, you say? They're putting themselves at risk there. How many of them was there?
It didn't seem like a lot. I mean, there was 2 batches of them, but I would say maybe 14 in each batch. 20 max.
So they've charged into a group of 70 people to try and get the people to disperse.
So so the group was in the middle of the group. There was a band playing. There was, you know, a girl playing on drums, a guitarist, some singing. People were all surrounding that, and then that's what they charged into. I think perhaps maybe they wanted to stop the music.
Yeah, they probably didn't have a permit, you know?
Well, but then they ended up kettling themselves. The police got into the crowd, and the crowd surrounded them.
Of course they did.
And it was just, I mean, I don't know who's giving these orders to them, but they're putting the police in danger as well as us.
So the crowd are obviously upset because the police have charged into them. You know, did you see what I saw some scuffles and whatever that was going on there? But here's the thing, right? We've got to the end of this, and we're talking about really what's gone on here. And I'm trying to. So the thing is, it's annoying, Naila, because this is all they talk about, isn't it, in the media? This bit that we're talking about. They're talking about the police. They're saying police got injured. Well, it seems to me,
got injured,
if you wanted to set up a situation where police got injured, well, do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're almost making the news. It's obvious police are going to get injured if 14 of them are charging 70 people who are listening to a band playing, isn't it? They're going to be pissed off, aren't they now?
And they were carrying batons and they were threatening. They made a couple of violent arrests. So when you see some of the footage, you'll see people are angry because they're grabbing people. They're grabbing people, a bunch of police on like one guy. It was horrible. And, I would have thought they'd be smart enough if they were even going to do that. There'd be much more of them, but there wasn't. I mean, I don't really think in actions like this that you necessarily have to do anything wrong to be attacked by the police. Yeah, I mean, it was just being there. That was the problem for the police. We were there and they didn't want us to be there.
So and that's what the BBC report on, the injuries to police.
So what happened after? The police were obviously outnumbered and they ended up getting pushed out of the park. And then, like one of the entrances, they formed a line and stood there. There was a lot of anger. If you listen to the videos, there's various videos of this point where, people are shouting things like,
200,000 more people on the streets. No violence until the police show out.
Are you proud of what you're doing? Are you proud of it? Can you look yourself in the mirror? About this?
Stuff like that. People were really, really angry, telling them to leave the park. And then a whole other bunch of police came, and I just thought it was going to get, much messier, but they came in and basically sent the police that had charged away. And I was talking to a couple of these policemen after, and they said that they were there to de-escalate the situation.
So what were the first group of people there to do?
They were well, the first police were obviously there to antagonize people, and they did.
Well, they got their story, didn't they, in the BBC? I'm not suggesting that that's what happened here.
That's the only story in the BBC.
That's and that's where they didn't report on the 500,000 people that went. And it goes back to what I said about the book as well. Or there were worthy causes and unworthy causes. Again, they don't report on 500,000 people, but if 24 right-wingers or 24 Nazis marched, which nobody really cared about, they'd report on that endlessly in the media. And it's for all the protests I've been to, they do this intentionally. They get it wrong intentionally. And what I'm worried, Naila, if you've heard any of my stuff recently, is that the erosion in trust in, establishments and now institutions like the BBC and whatever, if we don't believe these people during a pandemic, when we need to trust them the most, and we don't believe them, and it's clear they're lying. And it's abundantly clear. Every single person at that march this Saturday will look at the media and just go, they're lying. And I know that because everybody who's been at all the protests I've been to over the past 3 years will say the same thing. Oh, they're lying. The media are. All bets are off, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think it the way that they misreport or don't report on these protests will radicalize people.
Yes.
In the sense that, you know, there's a lot of people. I saw some of Anna Barisa's coverage, and you know, she's talking to people, and you know, a lot of them, these are their first protests. This one on Saturday was their first protest.
Yeah.
Now, if they see that, they see with their own eyes the amount of people, and then they go home and turn on the BBC or ITV or whatever and see no coverage, complete censorship on this. You know, what is that going to make them think? I do want to say though, there were people from all over the country here on Saturday.
Right.
I was told that trains weren't coming into certain major stations like King's Cross and what have you. Yeah, I heard that from a few people. So it seemed like they were trying to restrict the numbers.
You know,
too.
it's strange you say that, Naila, because I covered many protests over the last few years. I was on a few journalists that actually went to both pro-Brexit and pro-EU protests. And I can tell you the difference in the way the transport system worked was incredible. Because if you went to a pro-Brexit march, what they used to do is the whole place was opened, so you couldn't get in there. So like they would shut down the tube stations in the centre around there, so you had to get off at other tube stations and walk in. And then they would open the tube stations at the end of the day, so you could get out really quick. Whereas if you went to a pro-EU march, the reverse happened. You could get in there, no problem. All the tube was open and they could get in. You could pack you in. They would get the cameras above. And then they would close the tube stations at the end of the day. So it looked like more people were in this huge thing. And now you're saying that there were no overhead. I certainly saw no overhead stuff. So you can see that they're manipulating the news. They are manipulating the news to try and propagandize a nation into, let's face it, you know, just a very submissive, into submission.
Well, I mean, with the Brexit protests, I mean, I could imagine, I mean, I'm not surprised that happened because the state was opposed to exiting the EU. So, of course, they would try to limit the amount of people that were protesting against being in the EU. You know, that's no surprise to me. And, you know, I don't think any tactics by the state like this are beneath them at this point, you know.
Big thank you to Naila for her time today, and excellent report. Follow her on Twitter @BrownNaila. She's great. I'll leave a link underneath this video when it drops. So you heard Naila, an entirely peaceful day, which was de-escalating until the police showed up and rushed a load of people who were dancing or listening to a band dancing. Police who then buggered off to be replaced by other police who were thankfully this time though brought in to de-escalate the situation which had been escalated by the police. An escalation that led to at least one of them I saw being slightly hurt. He had a bit of blood on his face, but he was still going about his duties. It didn't hurt him too much. And that's where the BBC decided to begin their version of events. You know, this is almost a carbon copy of what happened at the last protest I was at. It's like their modus operandi. It really is. The powers that be are creating their own news. They're lying to you every single day, not just about protests, but you can see here that's what they're doing. They are the boy who cried wolf. They've been crying wolf our entire lives, and I have years of coverage proving it. And right now they're crying wolf and lying about China and about Duma still, and about Russia, about anything and about any perceived threat. They're told to cry wolf about in order to keep you misinformed and fighting each other instead of fighting a system which is screwing you all and attempting to take away your every last right, including your right to seemingly stand in a park and listen to music. And I'm betting, all things aside, all of the things aside, that every single person at that protest on Saturday know it. They know they're being lied to every single day by the government and media, and I'm guessing pretty much every single one of you watching this right now think the same too. Our governments and media are the boy who cried wolf. Can you blame a single one of those estimated 500,000 people who were there on Saturday? Can you blame any of them for not trusting them? I don't blame them for that one bit. No matter what your feelings on COVID are or lockdowns or whatever, you got to admit, you cannot blame them for not trusting our media and government. It's about time we started listening to these people, I think, and talking to them instead of demonising them and throwing shit at them on Twitter. If you ask me. Anyway, instead of taking fringe incidents and people from the extremes at these protests and then presenting them as the main story, while ignoring the majority there, some of which have very valid questions, I've heard them, very valid questions and grievances which need to be answered. And it's especially about time we did that, given that the crime bill the government are trying to bring into law that's going to limit our right to protest and give more powers to the police. It's really about the time we had a really good, honest conversation about heavy-handed police tactics at protest events, isn't it? In fact, I think it's about time we had a good, honest conversation about a lot of things, considering all the lies and misinformation we've been fed these last few years.